Rich people think their maids know next to nothing. Meanwhile, the maid knows the Wi-Fi password, the secret divorce papers in the drawer, and the exact sound his guilt makes at 2:37 a.m. Welcome to today's story. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. The mansion sat like a spaceship on a cliff, all chrome edges, floor-to-ceiling glass, and silence thick enough to make you feel like whispering. Perched high in the Hollywood Hills, Isaac Blair's $40 million fortress wasn't built for living. It was designed to intimidate. A structure of power, not peace. The kind of place where sunlight came in, but warmth didn't. Inside, the temperature was always a perfect 70 degrees. The floors gleamed like they'd never been touched by human feet, and the house had no scent, not of food, not of flowers, not even of people. It ran like a tech symphony, voice-activated walls, AI assistants with no names, security cameras that watched more than they blinked. Even a fridge tracked calorie intake and suggested fasting windows. You didn't live here. You performed in it. Isaac Blair, 41, walked the halls like a ghost who owned the place. His schedule was brutal. Meetings, markets, mergers. Sleep was optional. Emotions a liability. He had the kind of money that made problems disappear, but never feelings. His reputation in the tech world was godlike. In his personal life, he was a rumor wrapped in a suit. He didn't smile much. And when he did, it usually meant someone was about to lose everything. The only person who entered his world regularly, without fear, was Rosa. She arrived each morning at 6:30 sharp, sometimes earlier. 27, quiet, practical, Latina, originally from East LA. She kept her curly hair tied back in a low bun, wore the same blue-gray uniform every day, and rarely looked Isaac in the eyes. Not out of fear, but because she had no interest in being seen. She glided through rooms like a memory, cleaning without a sound, folding without a trace, disappearing before her presence was ever acknowledged. She never overstepped, never asked questions, never lingered, just worked, just left. To Isaac, she was almost part of the furniture. Until the afternoon, everything shifted. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way. The board meeting had run late. Isaac returned home around 4 p.m., earlier than usual. He poured himself a drink he wouldn't finish and walked into the study, eyes scanning the room absently. That's when he saw her. Rosa. She was standing near the desk, not cleaning, not organizing, just pausing. In her hand was something small, a flash drive. Black, unmarked. She looked at it for just a second too long, then slipped it into the pocket of her apron with a calm, deliberate motion. She turned and walked out, just as Isaac stepped behind the frosted glass pane between the study and the hallway. He said nothing, but something inside him flipped. Isaac had seen embezzlers in suits. He'd uncovered betrayal in shareholders' reports. But this? Rosa had no access to his systems, no passwords, just proximity. And that alone made her dangerous. Especially now. He didn't ask her about it, didn't confront, didn't alert security. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He followed her. That evening, after she clocked out and disappeared down the long, winding driveway, Isaac stepped into his garage, slid behind the wheel of his matte black BMW i8, and pulled out slowly, headlights off, engine whisper quiet. For the first time in over a decade, Isaac Blair wasn't chasing profits or productivity. He was chasing answers. He tailed her through Beverly Hills, past the glitz of Rodeo Drive, then east, into streets that grew dimmer and narrower with each passing mile. She didn't drive. She took 2 buses and walked 6 blocks. Always the same route. He stayed 2 car lengths back, hidden beneath shadows and tinted glass. She finally stopped in front of a worn-out community center with chipped paint and hand-lettered signs in Spanish. She didn't hesitate, just slipped inside like she'd done it 100 times before. Isaac parked, engine still running, hands tied on the wheel. He could have driven off. Should have. But he didn't. He got out and crossed the street, standing just far enough to see her through the dusty glass. What he saw made his throat tighten. Rosa, out of uniform now, was hugging a woman with a bruise on her cheek. She knelt beside a little girl, missing a shoe, and handed her a teddy bear. She unpacked food from her bag, canned goods, milk, tampons, baby wipes. She began organizing tables. People lit up when they saw her, like she was hope itself. She wasn't stealing. She was surviving. And that night, Isaac saw something that would cost him more than money ever had. It was the first time he realized the maid wasn't cleaning his house. She was cleaning up what his world had broken. The drive from the Hollywood Hills to South LA felt like a descent into another world, not just geographically, but spiritually. Isaac had always known these parts of the city existed. He just never had a reason to see them. Until now, he parked a block away from the community center, the same place Rosa had entered the night before. The building looked like it had survived a storm, maybe several. The paint peeled in long strips. The windows were clouded with age, and a single flickering bulb hung by the side entrance like a tired sentinel. The sign out front read, Casa Esperanza, House of Hope. Isaac sat behind the wheel of his car, the BMW's quiet hum still vibrating under him. He stared through the windshield like it was a screen he couldn't look away from. Rosa had just stepped off the bus. Her maid uniform was gone, replaced with a navy hoodie and jeans. She walked with purpose, no hesitation, no glance over the shoulder. She held a large duffel bag slung over her shoulder like it weighed nothing, but Isaac could tell from the way her arm tensed that it wasn't light. She pushed open the center's door and disappeared inside. He waited a minute, then two. Curiosity pulled harder than logic. He stepped out of the car, kept his distance, and crossed the street. From where he stood, just beyond a tattered iron gate, he had a partial view through the murky front window. Inside, the energy couldn't have been more different from his mansion. Children darted around, playing with second-hand toys. Women sat in folding chairs, some holding infants, others wrapped in heavy silence. The room buzzed with low murmurs in Spanish, interrupted occasionally by soft laughter or the clatter of metal pots. And Rosa had transformed. He watched as she unpacked the duffel. Cans of soup, bags of rice, juice boxes, boxes of tampons, children's vitamins, even a few stuffed animals. She didn't announce herself or wait for applause. She just moved, setting up a folding table, distributing goods, giving the tired and the struggling something they hadn't had in a long time. Care. A little girl tugged on her hoodie. Rosa bent down instantly, brushing the child's hair behind her ear. Isaac caught a glimpse of a bandage on the girl's arm. Rosa touched it gently, whispering something that made the girl nod. Then came the meeting. Rosa walked to the front of the room, standing before a corkboard covered in pictures. Isaac squinted. The photos weren't celebratory or decorative. They were raw. Women with black eyes, children holding signs that said, Estoy a salvo ahora. I'm safe now. Handwritten notes, some in English, others in Spanish, were pinned beside them. Gracias por salvarme. You made me believe in people again. I never thought I'd live long enough to feel free. She began speaking to the group. Fluent Spanish, firm but gentle. Isaac couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Guidance. Compassion. Authority. It didn't make sense. Rosa wasn't just helping. She was leading. From what Isaac could gather, this wasn't some casual side project. Rosa wasn't dropping off supplies on her way home. She was running a full-blown underground support network. The donations, the shelter, the system. This was organized, private, protected, and entirely hidden. Isaac blinked, trying to reconcile the image. The Rosa he knew vacuumed floors and wiped glass without leaving a streak. The Rosa in front of him spoke like someone who'd built an army from ashes. Why the secrecy? Why not ask for help? Especially from someone like him. Someone with power, with reach, with bottomless funds? But then again, maybe that was exactly why she hadn't. He thought about the flash drive. Maybe she didn't take it. Maybe it was something else. Or maybe it wasn't about the object at all, but what she feared he could discover if he ever got too close. Isaac leaned back against the gate, arms crossed, mind spiraling. She wasn't stealing from him. She wasn't afraid of him. She was simply ignoring him. And somehow, that stung more than betrayal ever could. He stood there, silent and invisible, long after the meeting ended and the families trickled out. Long after Rosa began wiping down tables and turning off lights. Long after she pulled the door shut behind her and walked back toward the bus stop with nothing but a half-empty bag and tired eyes. The night swallowed her up. And for the first time in a long time, Isaac Blair didn't feel like a man watching someone else's life. He felt like a man who had no idea what his own was even worth anymore. Isaac Blair had always been a man obsessed with patterns, code, market trends, political donations. He believed everything and everyone left a digital footprint. And Rosa? She had been spotless. Too spotless. Until now. It was just after midnight when he sat in front of his 6-monitor setup in his home office. Eyes narrowed, fingers hovering over the keyboard like a pianist before a complicated concerto. He ran a standard background check first. The kind that pulled up addresses, aliases, social media, DMV records. But the system came back with almost nothing. Rosa Aguilar. No high school transcripts, no social media footprint, no credit history before 2016. Ghost. Isaac leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen. In his world, ghosts didn't exist. He went deeper. Pulling from private search databases, scraping public records, even calling in a quiet favor from an ex-NSA contact who owed him a debt. Then, there it was. Name, Rosa Cortez Jimenez. D.O.B. August 22nd, 1997. Place of birth, El Sereno, Los Angeles. His pulse slowed. He barely blinked. Her mother, Alma Jimenez, once a grassroots activist. Her father, Victor Cortez, owner of a plot of land in Boyle Heights, the exact location where Isaac's company, Blair Tech Developments, had bulldozed land for the sprawling Ridgefield Plaza Mall 11 years ago. Isaac's stomach turned cold. He dove into the files, scanned land acquisition documents, court filings, press releases from a decade ago. And then, buried in the attachments of a long-forgotten project folder, he found it. Cortez v. Blair Tech Developments. Case hashtag 0712. CV 342. Filed in 2014. Dropped 6 months later. Reasons listed as withdrawn by plaintiff. Isaac's eyes froze on the digital signature on page 12. I, Blair partner, Blair Tech Legal. His own name. He had been there. At the table. Signing off on settlements. Pushing deadlines. Bulldozing lawsuits with expensive lawyers and aggressive PR tactics. It was just another land deal to him back then, another notch in his empire. But to Rosa, it was the day her world collapsed. A separate file mentioned Victor Cortez's death, suicide, weeks after the lawsuit was dropped. His wife, Alma, never seen again after that year. No funeral records, no obituaries, just silence. Isaac stared at the screen, barely breathing. And Rosa? She'd come to work every day, cleaned his mirrors, swept his floors, washed his sheets. Not a single flicker of recognition in her voice, no bitterness in her eyes. But now, he began to suspect. She knew. She had known all along. She had been living under his nose, folding his clothes, dusting his accolades, feeding the same man who helped dismantle her family's life like it was a game of Monopoly. And she never said a word. Why? What did she want? Was this revenge? A long game? He leaned forward, his face close to the screen, scanning again, desperate for something more. A motive. A warning sign. But there was nothing. Rosa's recent life was blank. Just 5 years of job after job, cleaning, caregiving, tutoring. All low profile. All invisible. Isaac shut his laptop slowly, the screen snapping to black. For a moment, the mansion felt even colder than usual. The silence pressed in like ice. He walked to the wall of glass that overlooked the entire city, a glowing sprawl of wealth and want, poverty stitched to privilege like two different fabrics forced into the same quilt. From up here, he had always seen the city as data points, revenue streams, opportunities. Now all he could see was a lie beneath the floorboards. He took a long breath and whispered to no one. "What the hell are you doing, Rosa?" Still, he didn't fire her. Still, he didn't confront her. He just kept watching. Because for the first time in his perfectly calculated life, Isaac Blair wasn't sure if he was the puppet master, or the one being played. Isaac waited for Rosa in the foyer the next morning, a space designed to impress, with ceilings that kissed the sky and a Japanese stone fountain bubbling quietly in the corner. It was the first time he'd ever stood there for anyone. She entered through the service entrance like always, her hoodie slightly damp from the early LA fog. She looked surprised to see him, but only slightly. "Morning, Mr. Blair," she said, placing her bag neatly on the bench by the wall. Isaac studied her. His jaw was tight, fingers curled at his sides. "We need to talk." Rosa tilted her head slightly. "About what?" "You know about what," he said. "I followed you. I saw the center. I know who you are." Rosa Cortez Jimenez. Her face didn't move, not even a flinch. She stared back at him like she had been expecting this moment. "I volunteer there," she said calmly. "Nothing I haven't told you before. You lied about your name." She gave the faintest shrug. "You never asked." He stepped closer. "Your father owned land where Ridgefield Plaza is now. That wasn't just some random lot. You were there, weren't you?" Her eyes flicked upward. "A lot of people were there. I clean houses now." Not much more to say. It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't a denial either. Isaac's voice cracked, not loud but sharp. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have done exactly what you're doing now." She turned and started toward the kitchen, feeling guilty in a palace built on bones. He followed her, his pace quickening. "You think this is about guilt? I think this is about control," she said without turning. "Rich men don't like not knowing what people around them are carrying." They were in the kitchen now, all white marble and industrial chrome, a space meant to showcase wealth more than feed anyone. She unpacked groceries from her bag like nothing was happening, like he hadn't just unearthed her past. He stood frozen, watching her movements, precise, methodical. The same hands that folded his towels were feeding entire families in secret. She wiped the counter clean, then looked up. Her voice dropped a level. "I don't need your help, Mr. Blair. And I don't need your curiosity, either. We're not the same kind of people. We never were." She left the room without another word. And Isaac broke. He didn't say anything, just stood there, in the glow of his $80,000 imported kitchen lighting, staring at the countertop like it had answers. That night, he couldn't sleep. The silence in the mansion clawed at him. At 2:13 a.m., he wandered back in his office, barefoot and dazed, and began pulling up archived security footage from the Ridgefield deal. Footage most people assumed had been deleted. He found it. Boardroom, October 2014. Young Isaac, slick-haired, sharp-suited, flanked by lawyers and developers. The projector displayed a neighborhood map. Circled areas lit up in red. "These are our targets," a man on the screen said. "Privately owned lots. Primarily Latino-owned. Low resistance. Easier settlements. Cheaper legal pushback." Isaac watched as his younger self nodded in approval. He even made a joke. Something cold. Something like, "They should have sold to Starbucks when they had the chance." He didn't remember saying it, but there it was. His face on the screen. His voice. His signature moments later on the resolution papers. The moment he signed someone else's nightmare into reality. His breath shortened. His stomach turned. He stumbled into the kitchen and gripped the sink with both hands. And then he vomited into the designer basin of his luxury kitchen sink. The one featured an Architectural Digest 3 years prior. Granite imported from Italy. Gold-plated faucets. Worth more than most people's homes. And here he was, bent over it like a sinner at an altar, coughing out the rot of a decade-old deal. When he could breathe again, he dragged himself back to the office and opened every file tied to the Ridgefield acquisition. Contracts, memos, internal emails. It was all there, a paper trail soaked in silent violence. They hadn't just bought land. They'd hunted it, targeted immigrant families, bought out city councilmen, avoided headlines. The worst part? He'd known, not in detail, not fully, but enough. He had helped sign blood deals. And then moved on, built another app, closed another round of funding, climbed another Forbes list. Now, the ghosts were coming home, and they had keys to his house. Isaac waited for Rosa again. This time, Not in the marble foyer or the granite kitchen, but by the side entrance, the one where the staff came in quietly like ghosts. He stood with his hands in the pockets of his tailored sweatpants, hair tousled from another sleepless night. She didn't look surprised to see him, just tired. "You can't keep ambushing me," Rosa said plainly, brushing past him with her usual canvas tote slung over one shoulder. "I'm not ambushing you," he muttered, trailing behind her. "I'm offering help." "I don't need help." He followed her into the laundry room. The scent of lemon detergent filled the air, mixing with the heat from the dryer. "You don't understand," Isaac said, trying to sound composed, but there was an edge of desperation. "I saw the shelter. The work you do. You shouldn't have to carry that alone. I can fund it. Everything. You won't have to struggle anymore." She didn't turn around. She folded one of his white shirts with calm precision. "Don't wash your conscience with my life," she said. That stopped him cold. She turned then, finally facing him, eyes dark with quiet fire. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for you. To stop the dreams. To feel clean. But you'll never be clean. That blood's under your skin, not mine." He didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Rosa walked away, the shirt still in her hand. Her silence rang louder than any scream. The next morning, Isaac skipped his 9 a.m. call with the Tokyo investors. For the first time in years, his assistant had to explain to the board that Mr. Blair is unavailable. He wasn't. He was just sitting in the dark in his glass-walled office at home, scrolling through photos from the community center's Facebook page. Grainy group pictures. Smiles too wide for the dimly lit rooms they stood in. Rosa, holding a tray of tamales. A kid in a Spider-Man hoodie clinging to her leg. She never looked at the camera, always focused on someone else. By the end of the day, he wired $50,000 to a local nonprofit under the alias B. Lee, with an anonymous note, for the ones the world forgot. It came back the next day with a note scrawled on it in familiar handwriting. "We don't take hush money, but thank you for reminding us we still scare you." The rejection hit like a slap. He stopped going into the city altogether. His favorite restaurants reached out, asking if he'd like his usual tables. His team texted, asking where he was. His CFO emailed twice, then escalated it to his lawyer. Isaac didn't respond to any of them. His mind was no longer in boardrooms and IPOs. It was under fluorescent lights in South LA, with bandaged hands and handwritten thank you notes taped to a wall. He saw Rose's reflection in every glass surface of his house, not haunting him like a ghost, but like a mirror, reminding him of who he could have been if he'd ever chosen differently. Late one night, after another failed wire transfer to the shelter, he sat in the living room with a bottle of wine he didn't touch, just stared at it. When Rosa came in the next morning, she found him asleep on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes. She paused. He looked smaller somehow. "I'll quit," she said softly. His eyes snapped open. "What?" "I'll quit," Rosa repeated. "This, whatever you're doing. I won't let you make me your redemption arc. I clean your floors. That's it." He sat up, voice hoarse. "Please don't." Her eyes narrowed. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because I need you." She blinked, caught off guard. Not by the words, but by how broken he sounded saying them. "Not like that," he added quickly. "I mean, I need someone to remind me I'm still a person. That there's still a line somewhere between monster and man." Rosa stared at him, long and hard. Then she sighed, picked up the vacuum, and said without looking at him, "Fine, but don't mistake proximity for forgiveness." He didn't. But for the first time in weeks, he exhaled. And for the first time in years, he felt something that almost resembled humility. Isaac was used to secrets. He built his empire on them, buried truths behind NDAs, out-of-court settlements, and contracts so thick they could smother a conscience. But nothing, not even decades of calculated denial, prepared him for what he found in that dusty file-marked Cortez. Rosa's name had surfaced again, not in legal paperwork this time, but in a photo someone from his private security team snapped the day before, a blurry shot of her outside a modest school in Echo Park, holding the hand of a little girl. The child looked like Rosa, same intense eyes, same serious mouth. But she had curls, wild and untamed, and wore light-up sneakers that blinked pink with every step. Isaac zoomed in on the photo, knuckles white against the mouse. His assistant had labeled the folder. Subject: Rosa Cortez. Possible minor dependent. At first, Isaac assumed it was her daughter. But after a few phone calls and a quiet background check, the truth came out. The girl's name was Esperanza. Age: 8. Legal guardian: Rosa Cortez Jimenez. Biological mother: Camila Cortez, Rosa's sister. Camila was listed as deceased. Cause: complications from internal injuries. Domestic violence. Isaac stared at the screen until it blurred. Then he scrolled down further and nearly choked on his own breath. The man listed as Esperanza's biological father? Derek Sandoval, a real estate developer. A party boy turned portfolio manager who used to sit 2 chairs down from Isaac at every board meeting. Isaac remembered Derek's arrest. Assault 2 counts. A girlfriend hospitalized with broken ribs and a fractured jaw. Derek had shown up to a meeting 2 days later with sunglasses and a PR rep. Isaac had signed off on bailing him out. Business optics, his head of strategy, had said, if one of ours goes down for something ugly, it stains the brand. So they smothered it. Paid off the hospital bills. Told the press it was a misunderstanding with an unhinged ex. Kept the engine running. Now that engine had left a child motherless. Rosa never said anything. Not once. She had come into his home, day after day, folding sheets and scrubbing tiles, carrying that silence like a second skin. And he hadn't even looked closely enough to see it. Isaac shut his laptop and sat motionless, nausea climbing his throat. He remembered Rosa's words. Don't wash your conscience with my life. That afternoon, he followed her again. He told himself it was about protection, about knowing what was coming. But really, it was guilt wrapped in paranoia, spinning wildly into obsession. She took the train downtown. No Uber, no car, no flash. She walked 2 blocks from Union Station to a law office wedged between a taqueria and a dry cleaner. Gonzalez and Klein. Family law, civil rights, pro bono. Isaac stayed across the street, ducked behind a dirty window at a pawn shop, pretending to inspect old guitars. Watching her. Waiting. She was inside for exactly 47 minutes. When she emerged, she didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired. She stopped to buy a tamale from a street vendor, handed him a 10, and took only one. Then she walked west, vanishing into the crowd. Back home, Isaac poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. Instead, he stood in front of the massive window that overlooked the city and whispered, if she's suing me, she deserves every cent. He meant it, because somewhere in his mind, between the lawsuits and the ghosts, he realized something with sharp, brutal clarity. Every brick in his empire was built on someone else's silence. And now, that silence had a name. A face. A child with pink sneakers. The kind of silence that doesn't scream. It stares. Unflinching. Accusing. Human. The air was stiff with microphones. Reporters lined the front lawn like hungry wolves, jostling for the best angle. Cameras clicked. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Isaac stood behind the podium in a sharp navy suit, the same one he'd worn the day his company went public. This time, the tie was missing, the hair slightly undone. But his voice still carried the weight of power. I've made decisions in the past, he began, that I can no longer pretend were made in ignorance. Gasps scattered through the crowd like someone had lit a fuse. I am resigning from my position as chairman of the board at Eastgate Development Group. Effective immediately. The murmurs turned to chaos. Cameras pushed forward. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Vargas, is this because of the land fraud investigation? Are you being blackmailed? Is there a mental health concern? Have you checked into treatment? He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. I have sold 60% of my stock holdings. The remainder will be held in trust for low-income housing projects and restorative justice initiatives. He stepped down from the podium. Just like that. No follow-up. No damage control. No legal team waiting in the wings to clean it up. By sunset, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire developer Isaac Vargas resigns amid mystery shakeup. Breaking. Vargas liquidates majority stake in Eastgate Group. What's he hiding? Social media spiraled. TikToks speculating mental breakdown. Reddit threads unpacking conspiracy theories. Some thought he was dying. Others said he'd gone full white savior redemption arc. A few joked he'd found God, ayahuasca, or worse, morality. But none of them knew what was really happening. Because the truth wasn't public. The truth was personal. The truth was Rosa. That same night, the for sale sign went up on his Bel Air mansion. 22,000 square feet of handcrafted gilt. Chandeliers imported from Vienna. Marble flown in from Carrara. Walls that echoed because they were never filled with laughter. By morning, 5 realtors were circling like sharks. One of them called the press again. Isaac Vargas is liquidating his life. He was. Every corner of it. And then, quietly, with no press release, no lawyer, no fanfare, he wired $2.5 million to a nonprofit account. Not a personal one. The transfer went directly to the registered account for Esperanza House, a small shelter in East LA that supported women escaping domestic violence. Its founder was listed as Rosa Cortez Jimenez. There was no note attached, no anonymous email, not even a text, just money, a life-altering amount, enough to fix the leaky roof, pay the staff, expand their programs, hire trauma counselors, and maybe, finally, move out of the crumbling old church basement they'd operated from since 2012. The nonprofit's accountant flagged the transaction. Rosa stared at the bank notification on her cracked iPhone, her brows tightening. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She didn't run to thank him. She just locked the screen and slid the phone back into her jacket pocket. She knew where the money came from. She also knew what it cost him. Meanwhile, in the silence of his now empty home, Isaac sat cross-legged on the marble floor of his kitchen, the same place he once vomited into a 5-figure sink. This time, he wasn't sick, just hollow, exhausted, a man peeling off a second skin, one regret at a time. His phone buzzed with calls he ignored, investors panicking, friends confused, lawyers desperate for clarification. He answered none of them. He stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Burn it all down." Because it wasn't a breakdown. It was an awakening. The kind that doesn't come with applause or a clean ending. Just the quiet decision to stop building empires out of other people's grief. The knock wasn't polite. It wasn't soft or curious or accidental. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind that echoes through marble and money. Isaac looked up from the pile of papers strewn across his dining table. Contracts, deeds, resignation letters, the skeletons of his empire bleeding ink all over $1,000 suede runner. Another knock. Louder. He walked barefoot across the cold stone floor. Half the house was already packed up, art pulled from walls, statues crated, closets stripped bare. Boxes towered like ghosts of a life he couldn't unlive. He opened the door, and there she was. Rosa, her face tight with rage, eyes dark, lips pressed into a line so sharp it could have cut him clean open. She stood in worn jeans and a black windbreaker, hair pulled back, no makeup. She didn't look like a maid. She didn't look like someone grieving. She looked like a storm that had chosen its target. "You don't get to disappear," she snapped, pushing past him into the foyer. "You don't get to dump blood money and vanish." Isaac didn't stop her. He just shut the door gently behind them. She turned to face him, arms crossed. "You think wiring a check makes you clean?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't do it to be clean." "Then why?" He didn't have a polished answer. Not anymore. No PR-approved statement. No executive charm. Just the truth, brittle and burning in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought I could fix something. Anything." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "You don't get to fix what you built to break." Isaac looked down at his feet, his hands, then back at her. He hadn't slept. The bags under his eyes were darker than the marble floors. "I didn't know." At first, Rosa stepped closer. "But you found out. And you stayed. And you signed papers. You evicted mothers. You funded predators. You built towers on stolen ground and called it success." Her voice cracked just slightly at that last word, and that broke something inside him. Isaac's knees buckled. He didn't try to fight it. He just sank slowly, heavily, onto the floor right there in his foyer like gravity had finally won. I knew, he whispered. I knew about your sister. I knew about the shelters. I knew about the men we bailed out, the neighborhoods we drained, the homes we bulldozed for parking lots. His hand shook. I knew, and I told myself it wasn't me, that it was the company, the system, that I wasn't the one swinging the hammer. He looked up at her with tear-rimmed eyes, glassy and raw. But I was silence. The house, once echoing with staff and power and catered noise, was painfully quiet now. Just the faint hum of the fridge and the sound of his breathing, ragged and uneven. I sold everything, he said, voice cracking. The stock, the house. I left the board. I don't even know who I am outside of all this. He pressed his palms flat to the floor. I'm begging you, not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But just tell me how to make something right. Anything. Rosa didn't move. Her jaw trembled. Her fists unclenched slowly. For a moment, she didn't see the billionaire who once toasted champagne over eviction stats. She saw the man who now knelt like a child in the rubble of his own legacy. I don't want your money, she whispered. I know. I don't want your guilt either. I know. I want the system that made you rich off our pain to burn. He met her eyes. There was no fear in his voice, no resistance. Then let's burn it together. She didn't speak. She turned, walked toward the door. But just before she stepped out, she paused. One more thing, she said without looking back. You're not the victim here. Never forget that. Then she left him there, still on his knees, surrounded by the ghosts of his wealth, the echo of truth hanging in the air like smoke from a slow, inevitable fire. It had been exactly 3 days since Rosa stormed out of the mansion, leaving Isaac kneeling in the ruins of his privilege. 3 days of silence. No calls. No emails. No sign of whether she'd even touched the $2.5 million wired into her nonprofit's account. The house was quieter than it had ever been. Most of the staff were gone. Boxes stood like cardboard tombstones in every hallway. Paintings had been taken down, leaving pale rectangles on the walls like ghosts of former opulence. Even the air felt different, less filtered, less artificial, more real. Isaac sat alone in what used to be the formal living room. No furniture, just a folding chair, his elbows on his knees, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows as L.A. glimmered like a lie in the distance. Then the door opened. No knock this time. He turned. Rosa stood there. She looked the same, and yet not at all. Something had shifted. She was calm. Still. No fury, no edge, no fire in her eyes. Just a strange kind of peace that unnerved him more than her rage ever did. Isaac stood. Slowly. Cautiously. You came back. I needed to say something, she said, stepping inside. He nodded. He didn't move closer. He didn't dare. Rosa walked to the center of the empty room, the sound of her boots echoing against the marble. She stopped and faced him. I knew, she said without ceremony. Isaac blinked. Knew what? Everything. From the beginning. The words fell like a guillotine. She crossed her arms. Your associate, the one who hurt my sister? I recognized his name the day I filled out your employment form. I cleaned his house once too, before it all happened. He used to brag about his get-out-of-jail-free card. Said he knew people in high places who could make anything disappear. Isaac swallowed. And you. I connected the dots. Fast. And I stayed. That stunned him. What? Rosa tilted her head. Because I wanted to see if money could ever make a man human again. The sentence hit like a punch to the chest. There was no malice in her voice. No judgment. Just a clean, sharp truth that cut deeper than any insult. Isaac couldn't breathe for a second. She went on. Men like you are never told no. You've been protected, applauded, forgiven for things that ruin the lives of people like me. He stepped forward, helpless. Then why not expose me? She let out a small, almost bitter laugh. You'd survive it. They always do. Headlines for a week. A rehab stint. A heartfelt op-ed. Then a comeback feature in Forbes. She looked him in the eye. I didn't want your ruin. I wanted your reckoning. Isaac's voice was barely a whisper. And did I reach it? She didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, she said, you asked me once what I wanted. The answer's the same. He braced himself. Nothing. Silence stretched like a wire between them. But, she added, I'll take the money. His brows twitched. For you? She shook her head. For them. The women who still sleep in cars. The girls too scared to speak. The mothers who whisper their pain to strangers because no one else listens. He looked away, throat tight. She stepped back toward the door. I won't thank you, she said, hand on the handle. Because accountability isn't charity. It's debt. Then she left. No dramatic exit. No slamming doors. Just the quiet click of her shoes fading down the hallway. The soft sound of a door closing behind her, and the deafening weight of her words hanging in the empty air. Isaac remained rooted to the spot, heart hammering, ears ringing. Speechless. No applause. No redemption arc. Just truth. Raw, brutal, and finally, undeniably human. The sound of bubble wraps stretching, snapping, and tearing echoed through the cavernous hallways like distant gunfire. Movers dressed in matching navy jumpsuits glided in and out of rooms with mechanical precision, wrapping, lifting, taping, boxing. A bronze sculpture of a dancer, imported from Italy, disappeared into a custom crate. A Monet, authentic, not a replica, was cushioned in foam and sealed like it was heading for the moon. In the grand foyer, the spiral staircase stood exposed, no longer softened by the velvet runner that used to coat each step. The chandelier, once warm and golden, had been unplugged. It dangled in silence, like a frozen tear from the ceiling. Isaac stood at the threshold, suitcase in hand. He wore a plain white t-shirt. No Rolex. No tailored suit. No entourage. Just a man alone in the ruins of everything he thought he needed. Across the room, a black marble wall glinted. For years, it had been the backdrop for lavish parties and photo ops. Champagne toasts, business deals sealed with million-dollar smiles. Now, the polished stone reflected a man he barely recognized. He stepped forward, slowly. Each step echoed louder than the last. The closer he got, the clearer his reflection became. Hair slightly overgrown. Stubble shadowing a jawline that once looked sharp and invincible. Eyes tired, unsure. No bravado left. He placed the suitcase down and stared. The man in the mirror had the same face, but it wasn't him. Not anymore. The silence settled like fog, until a voice, soft, internal, inevitable, spoke. He wasn't buying peace. He was repaying a debt he didn't know he owed. The weight of that truth had grown heavier by the hour. Every item leaving the house felt less like a loss and more like a release. The mansion hadn't just been bricks and marble. It had been armor. A fortress built to keep guilt, shame, and consequence at bay. But none of that worked anymore. Not after Rosa. Not after seeing her walk out, free, clear, dignified, while he stood surrounded by echoes. A mover passed by and nodded. We'll be done in an hour, Mr. Hall. Isaac nodded back, but didn't speak. His throat felt thick, like it was holding back years of unspoken things. He walked through the empty living room. The grand piano was gone, leaving a pale rectangle on the floor. So was the custom Persian rug, the liquor cart, the sculptures, the illusion of permanence. In the kitchen, he paused. One mug still sat in the sink. Roses, white ceramic, a chip on the handle. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it felt like the most honest thing in the house. He picked it up, turned it over, held it like it mattered. He thought about how she'd come in early some days just to boil water for tea before cleaning. How she'd hum old jazz tunes under her breath. How she'd never once sat down, never once made herself comfortable, even when she could have. Isaac placed the mug on the counter gently, as if it deserved reverence. Back in the hallway, movers lifted the final crate onto a dolly. One of them called out to his partner, joking about how heavy rich people walls were. Isaac smiled just faintly, a real one, his first in days. Then he walked to the front door. He paused, took one last look around. The staircase, the columns, the cold perfection of it all. It looked like a hotel lobby now. Impersonal, expensive but empty. He stepped outside. The California sun was bright, too bright. His eyes squinted as they adjusted, but he didn't look away. The Uber was already waiting at the curb. Just a black sedan. No driver service. No private car. Just simple, like everything he was trying to become. He took one deep breath, picked up the suitcase, and walked toward whatever came next. Not as the billionaire. Not as the empire builder. But as the man who finally understood that sometimes losing everything is the only way to earn back your soul. South Los Angeles had never looked this alive. The afternoon sun glinted off the glass windows of the newly finished shelter, casting long, golden rays across the sidewalk. It was sleek, but not flashy. Contemporary lines, soft colors, and blooming purple jacarandas lining the entrance path. Local artists had painted a mural along the side of the building. Bold, defiant faces of women, fists raised, eyes forward. No one needed to read a single word to understand what this place stood for. Inside, volunteers were finishing setup, stacking books in the reading corner, arranging fresh linens on twin beds, lining up hygiene kits like care packages made with love. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the playroom upstairs, where a circle of tiny hands passed around crayons and juice boxes. Hope, it turned out, had a sound, and it sounded like joy. Rosa stood quietly in the main hall, absorbing it all. Her heels clicked slowly across the polished tile as she walked beneath the atrium skylight. It felt surreal. All of it. The ceiling rose 2 stories above her, open and bright. It didn't feel institutional. It felt like a sanctuary. A carved wooden sign hung above the reception desk in clean, gold lettering. The Cortez Foundation for the Silenced. Rosa ran her fingers over the smooth grain of the wood. Her mother's last name. Not her father's. Not anyone else's. She made sure of that. Across the lobby, a small crowd had gathered. Local activists. City officials. A few survivors who had once slept on bus stop benches, now sitting upright with shoulders back, dressed in donated blazers and soft smiles. Cameras clicked as a local news anchor filmed a segment near the entry. But Rosa wasn't standing for applause. This wasn't about her. On the far wall, near the elevator, hung a modest bronze plaque. The kind that most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking for it. Just one line, etched into metal. Anonymous donor, in service of redemption. She knew. She didn't need the name. The amount he'd given had built this. Every room, every meal that would be served, every therapist who'd sit across from a broken voice and say, "You matter." Isaac hadn't asked for thanks. He hadn't even called. But the weight of that donation came with something heavier than gold. Sincerity. Rosa exhaled deeply. Not with relief. With release. "Mommy," a small voice said beside her, tugging gently at her fingers. Her niece, Camila, barely 5, eyes wide like marbles and hair tied in bouncy puffs, looked up at her expectantly. She wore a red dress and mismatched socks and clutched a glittery stuffed cat under one arm. "Is this the place for princesses?" Camila asked. Rosa knelt down, her eyes crinkling with the kind of love that softened even the hardest days. "No, baby," she said. "This is the place for queens." Camila beamed and twirled in a tiny circle, making the hem of her dress fly like flower petals. Rosa smiled, caught off guard by the warmth that bubbled in her chest. This little girl would never know the dark corners her aunt had crawled through. And that was the point. The shelter wasn't just a place for healing. It was a line in the sand. No more silence. No more shame. No more hiding. The building's front doors opened again, letting in a new breeze and a group of women with their belongings in trash bags and tired eyes. One of the volunteers greeted them warmly, offering water, hugs, and a clipboard. One woman hesitated, young, early 20s maybe, with a busted lip and a toddler balanced on her hip. She looked around, skeptical. Then her eyes met Rosa's. Rosa didn't speak. She just nodded, slow and sure like a promise. And the woman stepped forward. As Camila tugged her hand again, "Come on, I want to see the bedrooms." Rosa allowed herself one final look back at the plaque. No name, no glory, just truth. The kind you build something real on. She walked toward the future, hand in hand with her niece, heart steady, past the mural of faces, into the home she had built, for every voice that had ever been stolen. And this time, For the first time, the silence felt sacred.